Okay, I am back with another Earth Day book, and this one is probably one of my favorite ones. It's called The Little House. And this one I like because the illustrations really help to tell the story too. So I want you to really pay attention to the illustrations. And then I also want you to pay attention to how this story kind of goes along with all the other books that we've been reading about Earth Day and how it fits in. So this is just the inside cover of the book, but it tells the whole story. So it tells the whole story in just illustrations. So I'm going to just hold this up for a second, and I want you to kind of read it like you would a sentence. See how there's like 3 rows of pictures? So read across here and see what you notice each time. Kind of looks like the same house, right? But notice what's changing in the picture. I'm trying to hold it so you can see it. Okay, talk about it. If you need to pause the video, go ahead and pause it so you can really take a good look. Okay, I'm going to keep going though. So this is The Little House, and the stories and the pictures are by Virginia Lee Burton. Here's a dedication page. Once upon a time, there was a little house way out in the country. She was a pretty little house, and she was strong and well built. The man who built her so well said, "This little house shall never be sold for gold or silver, and she will live to see our great-great-grandchildren's great-great-grandchildren living in her." So he made sure to build her very strong. The little house was very happy as she sat on the hill and watched the countryside around her. She loved the sunrise in the morning, and she watched the sunset in the evening. Day followed day, each one a little different from one before, but the little house stayed just the same. So make sure that you're paying attention to the illustrations. So here it is in the country, and the house liked to see the sunrise and the sunset. In the nights, she watched the moon grow from a thin new moon to a full moon, then back again on a thin old moon. And when there was no moon, she watched the stars. Way off in the distance, she could see the lights of the city. The little house was curious about the city and wondered what it would be like to live there. Time passed quickly for the little house as she watched the countryside slowly change with the seasons. In the spring, when the days were longer and the sun warmer, she waited for the first robin to return from the south. She watched the grass turn green. She watched the buds on the trees swell and the apple trees burst into blossom. She watched the children playing in the brook. You know what is a brook? A brook is like a small little stream. So look at all of the farmers. Look at, they're using the horses to help them with the farming. Looks like there's a little farm. Look how they're getting around. Do you think this is from long ago or more like today? I think this and the farmers kind of helps me to think that this is long ago. What do we use now instead of horses? Tractors? Is this how you get to places, to the store? No, probably not. In the long summer days, she sat in the sun and watched the trees cover themselves with leaves and the white daisies cover the hill. She watched the gardens grow, and she watched the apples turn red and ripen. She watched the children swimming in the pool. Look at, kids usually like this one because there's a little naked kid. Now there's little wagons, some covered wagons. In the fall, when the days grew shorter and the nights colder, she watched the first frost turn the leaves to bright yellow and orange and red. She watched the harvest gathered and the apples picked. She watched the children going back to school. So here they are. It's not really how we get to school, right? Not so much. In the winter, when the nights were long and the days short, and the countryside covered with snow, she watched the children coasting and skating. Year followed year. The apple trees grew old and new ones were planted. The children grew up and went to the city, and now at night the lights of the city seemed brighter and closer. Look at the sleigh ride. One day the little house was surprised to see a horseless carriage coming down the winding country road. Pretty soon there were more of them on the road and fewer carriages pulled by horses. Pretty soon along came some surveyors and surveyed a line in front of the little house. Pretty soon along came a steam shovel and dug a road through the hill covered with daisies. Then some trucks came and dumped big stones on the road. Then some trucks with little stones. Then some trucks with tar and sand. And finally a steamroller came and rolled it all smooth, and the road was done. So look at, here they are, they're building. A surveyor is somebody who measures land. So they were measuring so that they knew where they wanted to put their road. So do you see them making the road? So things are changing. And look at, there's trucks and cars, kind of. But they still don't quite look the same as our trucks and cars. Now the little house watched the trucks and automobiles going back and forth to the city. Gasoline stations, roadside stands, and small houses followed the new road. Everyone and everything moved much faster now than before. Look at what's happening now. My goodness, look at all these houses. And look at, there's power lines. Did you notice the power lines? And the cars are moving faster and there's more of them on the road. Are there still the farms and the fields? Not so much anymore, right? More roads were made and the countryside was divided into lots. More houses and bigger houses, apartment houses and tenement houses, schools, stores, and garages spread over the land and crowded around the little house. No one wanted to live in her and take care of her anymore. She couldn't be sold for gold or silver, so she just stayed there and watched. So look at what happened. Doesn't really appear like she's in the country anymore, right? Now it kind of looks like she's in the city. Remember at the beginning where she was curious about it? I think she's finding out. Now it was not so quiet and peaceful at night. Now the lights of the city were bright and very close, and the street lights shone all night. This must be living in the city, thought the little house, and didn't know whether she liked it or not. She missed the fields of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. Pretty soon, there were trolley cars going back and forth in front of the little house. They went back and forth all day and part of the night. Everyone seemed to be very busy, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry. Can you make a connection to that? I kind of feel like before this quarantine, it's kind of how we live our life. What do you think? I know my life was pretty busy. Pretty soon, there was an elevated train going back and forth above the little house. The air was filled with dust and smoke, and the noise was so loud that it shook the little house. Now, she couldn't tell when spring came, or summer, or fall, or winter. It all seemed about the same. So the things that she used to tell the seasons aren't really around anymore. There's really no trees. She can't really see the sky. Pretty soon, there was a subway going back and forth underneath the little house. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it and hear it. People were moving faster and faster. No one noticed the little house anymore. They hurried by without a glance. Pretty soon, they tore down the apartment houses and the tenement houses around the little house and started digging big cellars, one on each side. The steam shovels dug down 3 stories on one side and 4 stories on the other side. Pretty soon they started building up. They built up 25 stories on one side and 35 stories on the other. So look at, they're making like skyscrapers. There's no more land, so they have to build up and they have to build down because it's getting too crowded. Now the little house only saw the sun at noon and didn't see the moon or stars at night at all because the lights of the city were too bright. She didn't like living in the city. At night she used to dream of the country and the fields of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. The little house was very sad and lonely. Her paint was cracked and dirty. Her windows were broken and her shutters hung crookedly. She looked shabby, though she was just as good of a house as ever underneath. Then one fine morning in spring, along came the great-great-granddaughter of the man who built the little house so well. She saw the shabby little house, but she didn't hurry by. There was something about the little house that made her stop and look again. She said to her husband, "That little house looks just like the little house my grandmother lived in when she was a little girl. Only that little house was way out in the country on a hill covered with daisies and apple trees growing around." Ah. Wonder what's going to happen next. They found out it was the very same house. So they went to the movers to see if the little house could be moved. The movers looked the little house all over and said, "Sure, this house is as good as ever. She's built so well we could move her anywhere." So they jacked up the little house and put her on wheels. Traffic was held up for hours as they slowly moved her out of the city. At first, the little house was frightened, but after she got used to it, she rather liked it. They rolled along the big road, and they rolled along the little roads until they were way out in the country. When the little house saw the green grass and heard the birds singing, she didn't feel sad anymore. They went along and along, but they couldn't seem to find just the right place. They tried the little house here, and they tried her there. Finally, they saw a little hill in the middle of a field, and apple trees growing around. "There," said the great-great-granddaughter, "that's just the place." "Yes, it is," said the little house to herself. A cellar was dug on top of a hill, and slowly they moved the house from the road to the hill. That looked like a good spot. The windows and shutters were fixed, and once again they painted her a lovely shade of pink. As the little house settled down on her new foundation, she smiled happily. Once again, she could watch the sun and moon and stars. Once again, she could watch spring and summer and fall and winter come and go. Once again, she was lived in and taken care of. Never again would she be curious about the city. Never again would she want to live there. The stars twinkled above her. A new moon was coming up. It was spring, and all was quiet and peaceful in the country. Isn't that a good story? I liked it. So then the cover page on the back is the same as the front. So do you see how it told a story? Like the little house when it was built, it was long ago. And then as time went by, you can see how things changed. Things changed around the little house. Look at up here, there was no electricity. Down here, there's the power lines. You see they stopped using horses for transportation. They used the cars and trucks and trains. And then you can see that down here, it turned into the city. So yeah, lots of things changed. Also, I don't know if you noticed, and the first time I read it, I didn't notice either, but here on the back it said she smiled. So then I went back, and I want you to see how her shutters and her door and the steps kind of look like a face. If you look at it, so watch the kind of the face on the house and see how it changes. So she's smiling, she's smiling, she's smiling, smiling. What do you think is going to happen when it starts getting busy in the city? So now it's not quite a smile anymore. It's kind of just straight across. Still kind of just straight across. Now she's kind of getting droopy and sad looking. So I thought that was kind of interesting. They kind of made the house have feelings, kind of like a person would, right? And see how she's like boarded up, and now it's almost like a sad face. I don't know if you can see it. So then they moved her. And then she becomes happy again at the end. So when we first started reading the story, I asked you to think about how this story relates to the stories that we've been reading. And what I think is that that's kind of what happens, right? Starts out in the country, starts out in nature, and then things build up around places and it becomes city, and we move faster and we get busy doing things. And right now, while we are stuck at home, or while we're staying safe at home, it's kind of a good time to slow down and really think about what things that we are grateful for, and take in nature. And it's a good time to slow down, kind of like the little house going back to the country. So think about that. Think about taking care of the earth. Think about going and being part of nature, going outside. So all good things, not just on Earth Day, but every day.